That's it. Always know with Storm Tracker 6. This is Tennessee This Week with your host, Gene Patterson.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tennessee This Week. A somber day today as we reflect on the tragic events of September 11th, 2001. Now, later in our program, we're going to look back on that day through the memories of our political pundits. First up, though, the city mayor's races dominated the headlines over the last several weeks as early voting for the September 27th primary began. But there is also an important special election going on in the 6th State Senate District to replace Jamie Woodson. Now, she resigned her post earlier this year. Democrat Gloria Johnson is unopposed. She awaits the winner of the Republican primary, and there are three candidates, all of whom are with us today. In alphabetical order, they are Victoria DeFries, Becky Duncan Massey, and Marilyn Brody. And ladies, thanks to all of you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
You know, we talk a lot about Homeland Security from a federal perspective, but clearly local and state responses to terrorism are very, very important. And let me start with you, Victoria. There is a philosophical conversation going on about where you would fall, or anybody would fall, in terms of civil liberties. Does it make sense to even temporarily suspend some civil liberties to protect all of society?
I don't think so. I mean, here we've been 10 years and we've not had an attack. I think that fear can be binding, and I just think that right now we just need to enjoy our freedom, and we just need to make sure that we beef up, and of course this is not on a state level, but I think at federal level we need to make sure that we beef up our, the CIA and the FBI and different people, Homeland Security, to make sure that they are very aware of what's going on and different cells that may exist. And I think there's probably a lot that we don't know, but I just think at the same time we don't need to live in fear.
Becky, some would argue that maybe racial profiling makes sense because the Al-Qaeda, they are Muslims primarily, they are Middle Eastern, they're not blonde, blue-eyed, small little grannies.
Right. Well, I mean, I think, we all have to take certain precautions in life and be aware of your circumstances. I think, you shouldn't racial profile. I mean, you've got to take things at the surface value, and if you see something that is suspicious, but I think we need to support our law enforcement officers and give them the tools that they need without infringing on the rights of our citizens. And I think that's real important to applaud and support our law enforcement folks that are out there putting their lives on the line every day.
As a state lawmaker, what can you do to keep us safer, do you think, in terms of this type of terrorism?
I think, as the other candidates have said, we've got to be cautious within reason. I think supporting our first responders and our law enforcement, who are the ones that are putting their lives on the line night and day, 365 days a year, is of utmost importance.
Each of you, if you look at your websites, touts the fact that you're all conservatives. You recently sent out a news release saying you got a 100% rating from the Tennessee Right to Life. Let me ask you, though, is there a scenario you could foresee where it would be appropriate to have an abortion?
That was one of the questions on the Tennessee Right to Life survey, had to do with when those circumstances might be appropriate. And I think, when the mother's life is at risk, that's certainly a situation where you've got to weigh that terrible decision.
In the case of a rape or incest, would that be inappropriate?
I think that's another area where people who are pro-life have concerns. When you think of a young child being violated, that's a terrible, terrible circumstance.
Becky, when I saw the news release from the Roddy campaign, at first it looked like an endorsement by the Tennessee Right to Life. Was that your intention when you sent that out?
Absolutely not. The Tennessee Right to Life sent a letter to me, and they indicated it was an identical letter sent to Ms. DeFries, indicating that we both received 100% on their Right to Life survey, and that we were strong choices for their supporters, and in support of our campaign, gave us the language that we were to use, which was that we were 100% pro-life on their survey.
What did you think about that news release?
Well, I mean, I took great exception with it. I mean, my life work has been working with the sanctity of life at Sir Thomas Center. The folks we serve there are our most vulnerable population that are often our throwaway that Hitler euthanized. And so it was a personal affront to me that the words that I had been rebuked by Tennessee Right to Life. I immediately called the president of Right to Life to clarify anything, and he said there had been I had not been rebuked. They had guaranteed me that they could work with all three candidates, whichever one was nominated in the Republican primary, and that they were confident in all three of us, and that we would, and as a result of the press release, they issued their own press release that there was no endorsement. And I don't believe that if they thought everything was totally kosher there, they would have issued the endorsement. But the rebuke, I mean, was just a personal affront. And I mean, I think that kind of language is what disturbs voters and sours them on politics. I mean, I think they want folks that are going to listen to them and folks that they can respect and trust that they're going to represent things, fairly and try to be fair competitors. And I hope we can go to a higher plane as we go forward.
And I'm going to get you to respond on that, but let me get your response. Were you offended as well by her news release?
I did not see the news release,
okay.
So this is the first time I'm being informed. So, but I just think that I have been asked questions about, that there was 2 people that had received the 100% survey, and I've been asked questions why Becky Duncan Massey did not receive the 100% life survey, and I said, I don't know if it's because she, number 1, didn't complete it and turn it in time, or 2, she had completed it, but maybe didn't get 100%, or she had gotten 100% and in the interview didn't have her answers confirmed. And so I don't know. So maybe for the viewers, you may want to answer that. But we had turned it in.
Would you answer that then? Why didn't you get 100%?
Well, I mean, there were 2 issues that when I met with them that I asked them for more clarification. I said, I need more background information on it. I said, I can guarantee you that I am 100% pro-life and I will support them on issues, but I wanted to get more clarification. So we were still in process. Their letter did not say I did not get 100%. It just didn't list me with the other 2 because we're still in the process, which we are basically completing today. And the president is out of the office today. But we were wrapping this up yesterday. But it wasn't so much that they didn't give it to me. It's just I asked for more clarification because you don't just go in there and say yes to everything without getting more. And they're the go-to people for the information.
Now, Marilyn, you heard what Becky has said. She was offended by your news release. Was that your intention?
Certainly not, Gene. I think this race is about the citizens determining which candidate most closely matches their values and will take their values to represent them well in Nashville. And certainly when we met with Right to Life, we filled out the survey, we turned it in on time, and when we met with the Political Action Committee board, it was very clear that that my stand was in conjunction with theirs. And the letter that we received simply said, we are not making an endorsement in this race. However, there are 2 candidates that completed a 100% Right to Life survey, and in support of your candidacy, please use this language.
Let me give just a little bit more on this topic, but Marilyn answered circumstances around incest, rape, endangerment of the health of the mother, maybe possible appropriate actions for an abortion. Do you 2 both agree to that?
No, tell me exactly.
If a mother's health is in danger.
If her health is in danger, at that point, I think that we need to make sure that we protect the mother. But I think that the role of government should always be trying to make sure that we protect life. And so, I just really think that I believe that at conception is when life begins, and I think that the role of government that we should protect that.
In the case of rape or incest, would you say no to an abortion as an appropriate action?
I had a friend in high school who was birthed by a mother who'd been raped, and and he was just a very wonderful person, and he came to terms with that. They were very they were very thankful to have him embraced in the family, and I just think that I just think government has to take the role of protecting life.
Okay, real quickly, Becky, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, obviously on the endangerment of the mother, that is definitely I agree with the abortion, even though I don't like abortions at all. I mean, and I don't agree with them. On rape and incest, I think we've got to look at it deeper. There's definitely some major success stories of folks that have lived successful lives and have been creative and been a good part of our life. But there's on the survey, I did answer that question correctly, that in those cases it would be okay.
All right, we're going to take a break. I didn't mean to get as far into that as we did, but we'll get into some other topics right after these messages. Stay with us. Welcome back to Tennessee This Week. Our guests are the state Senate candidates in the Republican primary, Marilyn Roddy, Becky Duncan Massey, and Victoria DeFries. Let's talk a little bit, as we're going to tape here on this program, I heard that California's cut a deal with Amazon in terms of getting sales tax revenues out of that company. That's become a major issue in this state. And Becky, since I've asked her the first question, you the first question, you'll get the answer to answer this first. Is it appropriate that Amazon pay sales tax in this state, even if it means perhaps losing some of that those jobs that they can bring into a state?
Well, my stand has always been that I think it's acceptable to give businesses a short-term business incentive to locate in a state because they have to build their infrastructure. It does bring jobs to the state, and I think that is important. You know, we do need to be developing new jobs in Tennessee, and that does need to be one of the focuses. I don't think any business should have an unending incentive. And that's really what it is. I would hope and I would encourage the federal government to take a stand on that, because that is an issue that puts unfair playing advantages to different states. And I would, whereas, I do like to see things happen at the most local level. I think that we need to equalize the playing field there.
Marilyn, your thoughts?
I do think we need to pursue a streamlined sales tax initiative on the federal level, but it looks like it's going to be a while until that happens, particularly with next year being an election year. And so I think we've got to remember that the state budget is built on sales tax revenue, and I don't think we can invite a player into our state and give them a free pass for an unlimited period of time. I'm comfortable with an incentive for a limited period of time to bring them here. We're glad to have those jobs in Tennessee, but it needs to be a level playing field for all of our small businesses and all of our retailers in Tennessee.
Victoria?
I think that it's really important. I agree with Marilyn on this, that we cannot afford to not have businesses pay the sales tax. I really don't even believe that we should really have those types of incentives, because I just think that right now the sales tax really aren't that high, and I don't know whether the incentives provided really increase jobs. And if, I think if someone would say, well, let's give a tax break to the businesses, I don't even know if really that they would use that leeway to hire more people. And I think for some companies, you might be luring them to our state, but I think until we get some things taken care of at the federal level, you might just be posturing them to really outsource those to China next year. So I just think that we need to be really forward-thinking before we make these decisions.
Well, let me follow up on that, because this state is now just under 10% in unemployment. Can state government, is it an appropriate role for state government and lawmakers to incentivize companies can government create jobs, I guess, is a simple question.
Okay, and I say the government really can't create jobs, but at the same time, looking at the federal, looking at what happened federally, everybody's upset by what happened in Washington. And it seems to me that there's an overwhelming confidence in the state of Tennessee because we've always been able to balance our budget. But when you look closely at the budget and you see how many federal dollars it takes to balance that budget, you understand that the federal government has become a huge investor and a huge player into the state of Tennessee. And then when you look at Knox County and how many jobs are created by local and state and federal government, we really have a lot of people employed here. So in a way, I know everybody says, socialism, it has a stigma to it, but when you look at the reality of the stark figures, it's almost like we're already there. And so I just think really what we need to do is we really need to help promote business, and I just think in order to do that, I think that some of the regulations need to be pared back for businesses, and that we don't need to have so much red tape, but taxes, we need that in order to operate, especially with so many federal dollars balancing our budget from the federal level.
Becky, can state government create jobs?
I think they can make a much more favorable climate so businesses can create jobs. As a businesswoman running an agency here in Knoxville with 160 folks on staff, I know what it's like to create jobs. And one of those things is reducing the regulation. The Small Business Administration estimates that regulatory compliance costs businesses $10,000 per employee, and you've got to get some of that out of the way. They can also, you're dealing with state governments, you have to deal with a multitude of people in a multitude of departments. We could develop more of a one-stop shopping per se, so we make it more favorable and easier for businesses to either develop or to operate each year, which helps save them costs too, so they can create jobs. And then we need to keep the taxes low and reduce some of the taxes or fees, which fees are a form of taxes too.
You bring up regulation, and I've heard a lot, I hear a lot about, well, if we had less regulation, the business climate would be better. But specifically, what kind of regulations are we talking about? Because most of them deal with issues that apparently have been sort of vetted out over time.
Well, what happens is, and I served on a legislative appointed regulatory task force, and I've sat there and I've looked at different regulations, obviously in the field of intellectual disabilities, but they transfer from department to department. And what happens is you get regulations on the book that were maybe good at one point, but they've kind of outlived their usefulness, or they may be okay in a perfect world, but they're really not getting the intended results that we need. And so I think we need to look at what are the most reasonable regulations that we need and clear out some of the old stuff and some of the ones that really aren't producing what we need.
Marilyn, what about state government? Can it create jobs?
Jean, clearly as a Republican, I believe that government does not create jobs, and government should not try to create jobs. But I know from my experience as a city councilman for the past 7.5 years that the role of government is to set the table for great capital investment and entrepreneurship and the expansion of existing jobs. We know last year in 2010, over 86% of new jobs in the state of Tennessee came from the expansion of existing business. And we want to make sure that we have the right climate with low taxes, limited government regulation, and a great, well-educated workforce that's going to be attractive to job expansion.
Well, let's talk about philosophies in terms of being a lawmaker. You have some lawmakers in Nashville who submit tons of bills. You have some who sit back and submit a few. Philosophically, would you be one of those kinds of lawmakers who would go in there and say, okay, my constituent says they want this bill sponsored, I'm going to sponsor it? Or would you be a little bit sort of step back and go, no, I want to do the bills that are important to me and who I think to my constituents?
Jean, I'm a consensus builder, and so I see my role as to support good legislation that's going to move the platform ahead for the people of Tennessee in terms of making this a great place to locate and grow a business and a great place with excellent public education. So I will support those kinds of education that addresses the critical issues in the state of Tennessee.
But in terms of sponsorships, would you be one? Will we see if you're state senator, will we see your name on a lot of bills?
I hope that when I'm elected, you'll see me sponsoring the bills that address the critical issues for the state of Tennessee, not a wide range of less critical issues, shall we say.
What about you, Becky?
No. I believe there's too much legislation, and we need to, the folks of the 6th District want someone that will listen to them, that they can trust, and that is really their advocate at the state level, that can help them when they have a problem with state government. So, I mean, I want to focus on constituent service and be a red tape cutter and be very selective in what I put my name on, because I really do believe there's too much legislation, and then also there's the unintended consequences once the legislation is passed. So the answer is no.
And you, Victoria?
Well, I'm sort of the bulldog of the group, and I just think that I would definitely want to know, I always seek, who's going to get who's the beneficiary, and where's the money coming from, and does it really support and help the common person? And so those are the 3 things that I would look at for anything that my name would go on.
But in terms of and we're about to run out of time, but if a constituent said, Victoria, I need this bill sponsored, would you be willing to sponsor it?
I would say, why?
That's a good answer. All right, ladies, unfortunately, we've run out of time. Victoria DeFries, Becky Duncan Massey, Marilyn Roddy, thanks to all three of you, and good luck to all three of you. And we'll see one of you in November. I can't even talk. Here we go.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you all. All right, stay with us. The Pundits panel is next. Welcome back to Tennessee This Week, Pundits time, and we've got George Corda and Larry Van Gilder in the house. Gentlemen, thank you.
Hello, Jim.
Let's talk a little bit about this state Senate race. You got three good candidates on the Republican side, awaiting Gloria Johnson in November. There was that kerfuffle there with the right to life issue. I thought I was a little bit surprised at the sort of conversation.
I have not seen the letter or the news release, but I understand the word rebuke was in it. Have you seen it?
I glanced.
If that was in there, then if that's not in there, then you don't have that.
I don't know that the word was rebuke was in the news release. I think it was just. I think that was Becky Duncan Massey's sense of it. But anyway.
Yeah, we were talking about this off camera, and I agree with George that it seems to me that word, if it was in the news release, certainly is.
Or a letter, or in any published form, if that word's not there, this conversation doesn't take place.
Yeah. Well, did you get any sense of where this campaign stands at this point, based on the three ladies and the conversation we've just had?
Yeah, they're all edgy and nervous. They're all, you can see it, they're all in a place where candidates usually are with 2 or 3 weeks left. They're, what have I done? What do I need to do? What do I need to do to them? What do I need to do to help me? Do I need more money? They're in this, am I sure I'm doing everything? And by the time Election Day comes, as someone once told me in my first campaign, he said, you won't care who wins, you'll just be glad it's over.
It's over, yeah, good point. Larry, what are your thoughts?
Well, I wonder about George's take on this, that, wondering what I'm going to do to them. I'm not so sure that we don't have three such nice principled people here that I doubt there's going to be too much sniping at one another as this goes on.
And I think that's correct. Yeah. Let's talk, we began the program with looking back on 9/11. Do you recall where you were on the morning of 9/11, 2001?
I absolutely did. I was here in Knoxville at a job I had at that time, and someone said, come in the break room and look at this, and there was the first plane had gone into the towers. I was telling George off camera, my daughter was living in New York at that time and lived in Brooklyn, and would have been on her way to work at about that time, and we were scared, as you can imagine, to death. I wasn't able to reach her till about midnight that night. Of course, all the phone service was out, and for quite some time, George and I were talking about this earlier. You don't think, gosh, there's people in that building.
See, that's what I was thinking. When I was at the West Hills Y, and I was just working out, and I heard one of the morning shows say, we've gotten a report that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center, and they showed the building on fire, and I thought, it took me about 15 or 20 minutes to realize there might have been people in there, because it seemed so surreal.
Yeah.
And then the second one hit, and everybody was just stopped and mesmerized. And the thing, that was a tragedy in itself. But just over the last 24 hours, I've been reminded of the tragedy of people who do not want to put the blame and the responsibility for the evil cadre of terrorists who killed all those people. They want to say it was an inside job and the government did it. And it's just,
conspiracy theories, that's got to be one of the
there's not a heck of a lot you can do to reason with a full-blown conspiracy theory.
What about 10 years later? Are we any safer, do you think?
Well, I think we're allegedly safer, but at what cost? There's been a great restriction on our freedoms, obviously. A lot of people aren't happy with the job that at least the TSA, for example, has been empowered with. I think it was Ron Paul in this Republican debate the other night who made some reference to, and this was a little outrageous, but there was a lot of sexual molestation going on at the TSA checking stations. So we've given up a lot. There's a lot in the Patriot Act that I think a lot of us aren't happy with. Maybe that's the price that we have to pay, from here on. But there's definitely been a diminishment.
You will never. I shouldn't say never, but I'm hard put to figure out that you will ever talk to a security consultant who says, oh, you know what you need here is less security. You need less intrusion. You need less infringement. I worked in the city-county building for 5 years. It's the people's building. You could walk in and out freely, and there have been plenty of terrorist attacks in the past. Now it's Fortress City-County building. You've got metal detectors to go through to get in. The public's not allowed to park in the parking garage.
Right.
We are inconveniencing ourselves in a myriad of ways in order to be protected. And the reality is, you were talking about it before the show. There's a report. Are there three guys out there that are planning to try to kill people? And you can protect yourself to the point where you put yourself in a prison of your own making.
Yeah, and I think to a degree we have.
Yes.
Larry, thank you very much.
Thank you,
George,
Gene.
thank you, and thank you for watching. If you'd like to watch the program again, check it out at our website, TennesseeThisWeek.com. Leave us your comments there as well. We'll see you here next week.
The views of guests and panelists of this program are their own and not necessarily those of WATE 6 or Young Broadcasting of Knoxville.